Welcome back to Kingdom of Yah. This is the Living Word Bible reading the story of Ikar or Haikar, however you'd like to say that. So, last time we did chapter 2, which was all of these parables and warnings to his newly adopted son, Nadan. And he gave them a lot of great words and also, referring to the straight path. This is the way, right? So, this is something you'll see in a lot of different books of wisdom, and it seems to align very much with scripture, which is going to be the main point that I make with a lot of these things is what is truth? And you'll see that truth is the same everywhere, right? So it's nothing about fact or is this historical or factual. It's more about what is universal, what is morally correct, right? And that doesn't really come down to even doctrine. This is things that are very universal and very simple, but yet somehow it's the hardest thing to adapt, which you'll see right here. So it says that he spoke all these things to him. When he finished giving Nadan his warnings and proverbs, he thought Nadan would obey them all. He did not realize Nadan was listening with boredom, contempt, and mockery. So he already does not have the right heart. He has what seems to be a stale heart. He has something that's not looking to become more, right? So he's not looking to improve himself for the sake of others, for the sake of himself, or anything like that. So maybe he's young, maybe he's arrogant. It doesn't give any, age or anything like that. So, or what time he started teaching him. After that, Haikar said, or sorry, stayed quietly in his house and handed everything over to Nadan. So I'm assuming this is when he's older, and I think it did say something about that when he's older, because he adopted him when he was effectively 2 years old or less. So hand everything over to him, his wealth, his slaves and servants, his horses, cattle, and everything he had earned, which sounds like quite a lot, according to the top, where he has apparently 60 castles, 60 different fancy buildings for his 60 wives, and probably something for himself, maybe a palace, and he has property, he has all sorts of things. So, effectively, a king. The authority to command and forbid what is now in Nadan's hands. Haikar rested at home. From time to time, he went to the king to pay his respects and then returned. When Nadan realized that all power in the household belonged to him, he began to look down on Haikar and ridiculed him. So now he's in a position of power, he feels, and feels like maybe he's untouchable. So he's getting a little arrogant here. Whenever Haikar appeared, Nadan would criticize him and say that his uncle had become senile and no longer understood anything. So he's trying to undermine him and discredit him. Nadan started beating the servants and abusing the household. He sold off the horses and camels and squandered his uncle's property. So he doesn't want anything to inherit, and he just wants money for himself, it sounds like. Nadan started beating the servants. When Haikar, said how cruel was he to the servants, and oops, always bugs me. And how was he ruining the household? Haikar rose up and drove him out and sent word to the king that Nadan has scattered his possessions and wasted his stores. So everything that he's stored up, he's just selling off, I'm assuming, just to have more money and more squandering of wealth for himself. The king summoned Nadan. So this is the king Sennacherib. As long as Haikar is still well, no one is to rule over his household or property. So while he's still alive, you can't just start doing whatever you want with it. So he's taking that away from him. So Nadan's authority over Haikar and Haikar's good was taken away. After that, Nadan neither came nor went to Haikar. So now he's kind of humbled and put in his place, and he's going to not be so happy about that. And and he would not even greet him. So he's not even looking at him. And Haikar regretted all his labor for Nadan and became deeply sorrowful. So all of his investment in what was effectively supposed to be his son, since God would not allow him to have a son because of his bowing down to the Assyrian kind of Babylonian way of all these idols, right? Which, with reference to Tobit, sounds like he understood this because Tobit was his uncle. Tobit was part of the northern tribe that was taken by Assyria, which means they understood what was right. They understood scripture and they understood that there was one God. So this seems to be why he suddenly prayed to God knowing that he was there, right? So he kind of turned his back on the idols and stopped taking advice from these other people. So, yeah, he's very sad about all of this that he's trying to pass down, which is his family's understanding, right? This is generations of understanding of what God is and what life is about. And he's trying to pass that on to his nephew, his adopted son, and he just does not want any of it. And this, I think, is one of many things in the story that are very relatable. We've all had maybe a son, a daughter, a niece, nephew, a friend that may have been very kind of insecure or self-centered or arrogant and just didn't know what life was about, right? Didn't really give much meaning to it. So he was hoping to be able to pass that on, but it's not something you can just do by just teaching someone, and it's really hard to force that onto somebody, right? They usually have to be in a time of crisis and a time of need, and especially when he's suddenly given everything and didn't have to work for all of that. Whereas Ahikar earned that by his wisdom, where Nadan did not have that wisdom to begin with, and he had no intention of learning any of that wisdom, right? He didn't look up to him. So now he's seeing the result of that. Nadan and his younger brother named, okay, he's got another sibling here, Ben Uzadar, Ben Uzarn, Benuzardan. I don't know if that's son of something, but I don't know. Haikar took him in Nadan's place and raised him and honored him greatly. So he took his brother, his younger brother, instead, put him in charge of the house and entrusting everything he owned. So that's not going to make him happy. When Nadan saw this, he burned with envy and jealousy and complained to anyone who asked and mocked Haikar. And then he says, "My uncle drove me out and chose my brother instead. But if the Most High God ever gives me power, I will bring him to the misery of being killed." So this is a big misunderstanding of who God is, right? It's not just some deity that you can give gifts to and give favors to, and then they give you power in return to do whatever you want with, right? And this is typically kind of what people understand, especially whenever they hear like, oh, just say it and it will be done. Whatever you ask for will be given to you. That is assuming that you're walking in righteousness, and whatever you would ask for would be done in righteousness. It would be a righteous thing to ask for, so of course it would be given to you. But it definitely does not work like this, so you're not going to get the power of God to be able to just smite somebody. Nadan kept everything about to set a trap for Haikar, gave some time and formed a plan and wrote a letter to Ahish, son of Shah the Wise, the king of Persia. I will definitely have to look up which king that is. As if it were from the king and from Haikar. So now he's lying about who this is from. So he's acting like this is Sennacherib and Haikar sending a letter to the king of Persia. Peace and health, strength and honor from Sennacherib and from his vizier, secretary Haikar. To you, great king, let there be peace between us. When this letter reaches you, hurry and to the plain of, I'll have to look that up too, Nisrin, to Assyria and Nineveh, and I will hand the kingdom over to you without war or battle. So that would be an odd letter to get to. I'm just going to give Assyria to you. He wrote another letter in Hikar's name to the Pharaoh. Peace be with you, mighty king. When this letter reaches you, come to Assyria, and I will give you the kingdom without war or fighting, which I'm sure they'll fight about that. That would be something that you could probably find in history too, so I'm kind of curious about that. Nadon's handwriting was so close to Hikar's, it looked the same, so maybe he even studied his handwriting or just was taught so well by him by probably writing out scripture or whatever because Hikar was a scribe. He folded and sealed both letters with Hagar's seal, so he kept a seal, or still has a seal, keeping them ready for his scheme. Then Nadon wrote another letter, and this time pretending it was from the king to Hagar, and sealed it. So he's just manipulating everybody, trying to pull the strings here. I'm just going to do that for now. So peace and health to my visor, Secretary Chancellor Haikar. When this letter reaches you, gather all the soldiers with you, make sure their clothing and numbers are in perfect order, and bring them to me on the 5th day. I always like to highlight these. In the plain of Nisrin. Sorry, I'm not familiar with that word. When you see me approaching, hurry and move the army against me like an enemy ready for battle, because I have ambassador from Pharaoh with me. I want them to see our strength and fear us, since they are our enemies and hate us. So he's trying to put on some big show here. Nadon sent this letter to Ahikar, one of the king's servants. Then he took one of the forged letters meant for Persia and laid it before the king, read it aloud, and showed the seal. When the king heard it, he was shaken and furious. So this is how I am repaid, what I have done to Haikar, and that he writes to my enemies. So he never sent the letter after all my kindness to him. Nadon, do not be distressed, my king. Do not be angry. Let us go to the plain and see whether this is true. On the 5th day, Nadon went with the king, the soldiers, and the officials out to the desert plain of Nisrin, and the king looked and saw Haikar and the army arranged for battle. Interesting. When Haikar saw the king, he came forward and signaled the army to move in formation against him, exactly like the letter had instructed. Haikar had no idea Nadon had dug this pit for him, so he also literally set a trap. He's moving a lot of pieces here. When the king saw what Haikar was doing, fear and rage seized him. Nadon, do you see, my lord the king, what this wretch has done? Do not trouble yourself. Go back to your throne, and I will bring Haikar to you, bound in chains, and I will remove your enemy without effort. The king returned to his throne, burning with anger, and did nothing more at that moment. So Nadon went to Haikar and lied to him. By God, my uncle, the king is delighted with you. He thanks you for doing exactly what he commanded. So, also, does he know what he would have commanded? Maybe as a second-hand guy he might have, but he was kind of stripped of that position. Maybe not fully at this point. I guess Haikar is supposed to be training his brother, but I assume just not trained for the position, just took away his possessions, but I guess he's still the visor. Although, I don't know. Now, he has sent me to tell you to dismiss the soldiers back to their duties and come to him with your hands tied behind you and your feet changed, so that the Pharaoh's ambassadors will see it and fear the king and their own ruler. Okay, so the Pharaoh just has an ambassador there, but not the king of Persia, so he didn't actually send it to the king of Persia. Haikar, to hear is obey, so whatever you say, I will do. Haikar immediately bound his hands behind him and chained his feet. And I wonder if this is, I assume this is actually like your elbows, right? This is usually how we see them bind people or arrest people, is they'll do it by their elbows. And it's definitely a lot more restriction that way. Nadan led him to the king. When Haikar entered the king's presence, he bowed on the ground and wished him power and long life. So it's giving him respect. Then the king confronted him. Haikar, my secretary, the governor of my affairs, the ruler of my state, what evil have I done to you that you repay me with such great or such an ugly act? I don't know why. They showed Haikar the letters written in his style and sealed with his seal. And when Hagar saw them, his limbs trembled, his tongue failed him. He could not speak from fear. He lowered his head and stood silent. So not much you can do. So he knows he's been framed. So he's keeping his mouth shut, which is the best thing to do. Seeing this, the king became convinced that Haikar was guilty, so he thinks that he's not speaking because he's guilty, but he's taking the wiser route of just not trying to argue and look defensive. He rose at once and ordered that Haikar will be killed and his neck struck with a sword outside the city. So now he's going to be beheaded. Nadan shouted insults at him. It didn't say anything about like a physical trap earlier, right? It said he put a trap in front of him. Maybe that was just referring to the scheme. I'll have to look into that a little bit. So, Haikar, you disgrace. You disgrace. What good are your plans and your power now? So he's mocking him. The king called the executioner, whose name was Abu Samik. Sennacherib, rise, swordsman, cut off Haikar's head at the door of his house and throw it 100 cubits from his body. So he's trying to make a display of him. Haikar knelt before the king. May the Lord the king live forever. If you want to kill me, let it be done. But I know I am not guilty. The wicked man will have to answer for his wickedness. So he's going to answer to his wickedness regardless. But, if you want to kill me. I'm not guilty, so no harm on me. So this is kind of a very courageous and honorable thing to do, right? This is definitely keeping in mind of the hereafter, right? The afterlife, the resurrection, right? So he seems to have this understanding of like, he's not worried about being killed, but he knows that whoever did this to him will definitely pay either now or in the next life, or in Sheol, right? In the lake of fire eventually, right? Still, my lord, I beg you in the name of our friendship, allow the swordman to hand my body over to my servant that they can bury me, and let your servant be sacrificed. So let me be sacrificed, but allow the swordman to hand my body over to my servants to bury me. So just do some sort of respect to me and my body, right? The king agreed and ordered the swordman to do as Haikar requested. The servants took Haikar and the swordman away to carry out the execution. When Haikar knew for certain he was about to die, he sent word to his wife, "Come out to meet me. Bring 1,000 young women with you and dress them in purple," so in royal clothing, expensive clothing, and silk, so they will weep for me before I die. Prepare a table for the swordsman and his men, and pour out plenty of wine for them to drink. So he's going to make sure that they're, he's showing his how much support he has too, right? That he can order this to happen, to have this many people come and weep before he even dies. So very clever thing that he's doing here is showing how much respect he has. And then he's also going to give respect to his executioner and the other soldiers, and give them wine to drink. His wife, who was wise and prudent, did everything he told her. That's always great. When the king's men and the executioner arrived, they found a table set with rich food and wine. They ate and drank until they were full and drunk, so made them nice and happy. Then Haikar pulled Abu Samik aside from the others, the executioner. Do you remember when Sarhadum, Sennacherib's father, wanted to kill you? So now she's kind of buttering them up and kind of reminiscing. I took you and hid you until the king's anger had passed, and when I brought you back, the king rejoiced to see you. Remember the kindness I showed you? The king will regret killing me. Oh, this is Haikar saying this. Okay, so I thought it was his wife for some reason. Okay, the king will regret. So he saved the executioner from the king's anger, the king's father, current king's father's anger before, and will be furious when he learns the truth. So whenever he figures out what actually happened, he's going to be so regretful that he killed him, because I'm not guilty. Nadan has deceived me and has done this evil to me. I have a hidden cellar in my garden so that no one knows about except my wife. Hide me there. There is also a slave in prison who deserves to die. Bring him out and dress him in my clothes. So they're distracted with food and drink right now. And I guess he is at his own door right now, so they're at his house. So this is pretty easy, but I wonder what prison this is. I imagine he doesn't have one on his property, so I'm wondering how far he's going to go. Bring him out in my clothes, and when the servants are drunk, have them kill him. So they're going to be a little inebriated here whenever they kill him, and they're not going to check to make sure that it's him. They will not know who they are killing. Throw the head far from the body and give the body to my servants for burial, and you will have stored up great treasure with me. So, in other words, if you do this favor for me, I'll probably do a favor for you later, right, when the time comes. So the swordsman did exactly as Haikar had planned and returned to the king. May the king live forever. Haikar's wife lowered food to him in the hiding place each week, enough to keep him alive. No one knew except her. News spread everywhere that Haikar the sage had been executed and was dead. The people of the city mourned for him, so he's very heavily respected. They wept and cried out that his learning and wisdom were gone, and they wondered where another like him could ever be found to take his place, because wisdom like this is certainly rare. But the king began to regret what he had done, and regret brought him no comfort. I'll just throw this up here too. He summoned Nadan, go with your friends and hold mourning for your uncle Haikar. Lament for him according to custom. So even though something bad happened to him, he is still saying, hey, you need to go respect your uncle, even though he's done something terrible, and honor him. But when Nadan, the foolish, the ignorant, and hard-hearted, went to his uncle's house, he did not weep or grieve at all. Instead, he gathered heartless and dissolute people and began feasting and drinking. He seized Haikar's servants, tied them up, tortured them, and beat them cruelly. He even dishonored Hagar's wife, the woman who had raised him like her own child, so effectively his mother, and tried to draw her into sin with him. So what sin that is exactly, I don't know if he's, doing something with her in bed or just beating her like the rest, or just, it sounds like trying to draw her in to beat the servants, maybe? I don't know. Haikar was hidden in the cellar and heard the cries of his servants and neighbors, and praised the Most High God, the Merciful One, and kept praying constantly. The swordman visited Haikar from time to time In the hiding place, Haikar begged him for help, and the swordsman comforted him and wished him rescue. So they're not really even saying at what time they're going to pull him out. I guess just whenever the king is, done mourning, maybe. And when the other countries heard that Haikar the sage had been killed, many kings were grieved. So he's upsetting nations at this point. And it did say earlier too that like people needed him to go to the pharaoh. They needed him to. So he's probably the reason that there's not war or something like this, right? And really helping other kings and helping other nations. They looked down on King Sennacherib and lamented Haikar, the solver of riddles. So he's got a lot of titles here. So, and this is some sort of reference that was in this original text, and I'll have to do some better cross references here, and I'll get rid of this at the bottom. But that was chapter 3. I'll just do these one chapter at a time. So you can see there's quite a bit to this story. It's a pretty interesting but fairly straightforward story. So let me know what you think of this kind of story, and if you've heard of it before, what kind of wisdom could you apply from this, and if you have any ideas for any other kind of text that we can read through or review, let me know in the comments.